Welcome to Life in Divinity. Please like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome back to the show. Today we are doing a deep dive into Vipassana Meditation. You may have heard this term floating around out there, and maybe you've even heard about it in connection with some pretty famous people.
Yes, that's right. Vipassana, which literally means to see things as they really are, is an ancient Indian technique. Rediscovered by the Buddha over 2,500 years ago. What's really remarkable is its non-sectarian nature. You don't need any specific religious beliefs to practice it.
Right, and at its core, it's really just a practice of self-observation, really being able to connect with your own mind and body. And the aim is, pretty profound. It's to kind of eradicate those mental impurities, those kind of deep-rooted habits and patterns that can weigh us down, and to cultivate inner peace and liberation and happiness. I mean, who couldn't use a bit more of that these days, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. In today's fast-paced world, a practice that offers us a path to stress reduction and self-awareness is so relevant. I mean, the growing popularity of Vipassana, including its adoption by some very prominent people, kind of speaks to its universal benefits.
Which brings us to the heart of our deep dive today. We are going to really unpack Vipassana meditation, explore its historical roots, how it's practiced, the benefits both from the personal stories and from the scientific literature, and how accessible it really is for everyone.
So let's start by laying some groundwork, talking about its history and its core principles. As you mentioned, this is one of India's most ancient techniques, and it's often described as a universal remedy for mental and emotional ills.
Okay, so when we say the practice itself, what does that actually involve? I mean, it's not just sitting still, is it?
Yeah, precisely. Although stillness is definitely part of it. The essence of Vipassana is to observe your physical sensations and your thoughts as they arise, without judgment. It's about training yourself to become an observer, a detached observer of your own experience. And this practice eventually cultivates a deep understanding of the interconnection between your mind and body.
I can see how just trying to observe without reacting to every single thought or sensation would be a workout for the mind.
Oh, it definitely is, especially in the beginning. This is why Vipassana is often taught in intensive 10-day residential retreats. These retreats follow a strict code of discipline. Things like abstaining from killing, stealing, and intoxicants. And this structured environment really helps to quiet the mind, to allow for deeper levels of self-observation.
10 days of silence. Oh my goodness, that sounds intense. So how does the technique itself actually progress during one of these retreats?
So you typically start by focusing your attention on the breath to help develop concentration and stability. From there, the focus shifts to observing the subtle physical sensations throughout your body. The aim is to really get a first-hand experiential understanding of the concept of impermanence, the fundamental truth that everything is constantly changing. Many courses culminate in the practice of loving kindness meditation, where you extend goodwill and compassion toward yourself and all beings.
Wow, sounds very systematic and layered. And it's not just some obscure practice hidden away, right? You mentioned it's globally accessible.
Absolutely. There are Vipassana centers all over the world, in India, the US, Europe, Australia, you name it. One of the most significant is the Dhammagiri Center in Ikapuri, Maharashtra, India. As we at Life in Divinity always suggest, these ancient practices often provide profound insights into navigating modern life.
Now, you touched on famous practitioners. This is always fascinating for me, to see how individuals in high-pressure, very public roles utilize these techniques.
It is. And while it's not always easy to get confirmation, there are quite a few well-known people who have incorporated Vipassana into their lives.
Let's talk specifics. Yuval Noah Harari, the author of Sapiens and Homo Deus. His name seems to come up a lot in connection with Vipassana.
Yeah. Harari's been a practitioner for over 20 years. He reportedly meditates for 2 hours every day. And he takes these really long silent retreats, sometimes for 30 or even 60 days every year. And he's spoken very openly about how Vipassana has been essential in cultivating the kind of focus and mental clarity that he needs for his writing. He's even been quoted saying that he could not have written his books without the focus, peace, and insight gained from practicing for 15 years. Now, could this peace and insight be what enables him to look at history without bias?
I mean, could this peace and insight allow him to process vast amounts of historical information without becoming emotionally charged? Maybe that allows for a more objective analysis. Just a thought.
That's quite an endorsement. What about other figures, like Clint Eastwood, Sting?
Well, Clint Eastwood has reportedly attended Vipassana retreats, although he doesn't speak about it much publicly. It is thought to play a role in his well-known sense of centeredness. And then there's Sting the musician. He's another person who finds Vipassana essential for managing the stress and fostering his creativity.
It is interesting that we see other meditation techniques like transcendental meditation, TM, getting more popular with a lot of Bollywood figures. You know, Aishwarya Rai Bachchan and Anupam Kher come to mind.
That's true. And the intensive retreat format of Vipassana, with its focus on silence and prolonged meditation, that might be one of the reasons why it's not as mainstream among entertainers compared to some of the shorter, less demanding techniques.
So going beyond these interesting personal accounts, what does the science actually tell us about the benefits of Vipassana?
Well, the science is really fascinating. While the personal stories are definitely interesting, it's important to look at the research. And there have been studies that show benefits that extend beyond these anecdotes.
Like what?
Well, there's a study published in NCBI that examined participants after they completed a 10-day Vipassana retreat in Muscat. And the findings showed that they had significant improvements in self-reported physical and psychological well-being compared to the control group. So this suggests that there's a real impact on mitigating distress.
That's great. And I remember reading something about its potential to reduce stress and anxiety as well.
Yeah, Healthline has highlighted the potential of Vipassana in reducing both stress and anxiety. There are also possible benefits for people who are dealing with substance use issues. And there's even some evidence that suggests changes in brain plasticity, although, more research is needed.
What about cognitive function? I vaguely remember something about that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. A study done in 2019 showed that experienced Vipassana practitioners actually had different brainwave patterns even before they began tasks, which suggests an underlying enhancement of their cognitive performance. And there was a study done in 2020 that explored the impact on sleep patterns. And they found that there was a lower density of sleep spindles in meditators. Now, this is interesting because sleep spindles are thought to play a role in memory consolidation. So this suggests that Vipassana might actually influence how our brains process and retain information while we sleep. As we at Life and Divinity often discuss, the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern science is really fascinating. And as more research is done, our understanding will just get deeper and deeper.
It's really cool to see how these practices are actually being examined through that lens. Now let's come back to accessibility. You mentioned that it's not just for, the elite or the famous. How easy is it for the average person like me who's just curious to actually learn Vipassana?
Well, it's designed to be universally accessible. The core teaching is offered at so many different centers all over the world. And get this, it's completely free of charge. These courses are actually entirely funded by donations from previous students who have benefited from the practice. You can find more information about course schedules and locations on the Dhamma.org website.
Free of charge? That is amazing. What if someone like me, can't commit to a full 10-day retreat right away? Are there other ways to explore the practice?
Yes, definitely. Dhamma.org also has an app, and it's full of guided audio recordings and really insightful articles to support your practice. There are also platforms like Vipassana at Home. They offer online courses that are donation-based, so that provides a lot more flexibility for busy people. And if you're someone who likes to read, there are books like Seeking the Heart of Wisdom by Joseph Goldstein and Jack Kornfield. They're excellent resources.
So it's really open to everyone, regardless of background or belief system.
Exactly. The fact that it's secular is fundamental. You don't have to adopt any religious affiliation to learn it or benefit from it. And going back to what you said earlier, the retreat centers, the ones in Igapuri, for example, they are structured in a way that they can accommodate working professionals, travelers, so it makes it much more feasible for different kinds of people to participate.
I'm curious to know how a practice like this might influence things like creativity and success. We've talked about Harari and Sting. What else can we explore in terms of that connection?
Well, Harari's ability to synthesize complex narratives and offer these profound insights likely comes from the mental clarity and sustained focus that Vipassana develops. Sting's long and very successful career in such a demanding industry is probably supported by the stress reduction and the emotional resilience that he gets from his practice.
I imagine that the intense pressure that comes with fame must present some very unique challenges. Does Vipassana help people to navigate that?
It seems like it does. The emphasis on equanimity. That means developing a balanced and stable mind, no matter what you're experiencing, pleasant or unpleasant. And the practice of non-reaction. These things can be so valuable in dealing with the inevitable ups and downs that come with a high-profile life. I read an interesting article in The Guardian. It was about someone's challenging experience during a Vipassana retreat. And even in those challenges, you could really see how they developed resilience and the ability to observe their experiences without being overwhelmed by them. Equanimity isn't about having no emotions. It's about training yourself not to get swept away by the intensity of those emotions, good or bad. And in the context of fame, this might mean being able to experience praise without getting too attached to it, and facing criticism without being devastated.
The potential benefits sound amazing and transformative. But are there any downsides or challenges people might face if they decide to really immerse themselves in Vipassana?
Well, it's important to be realistic. The retreats are intense. 10 days of silence, lots of time spent meditating every day. And that can definitely be a huge deterrent for some people. And while it's relatively rare, there have been reports of some adverse effects, like anxiety or feelings of depersonalization, but these tend to be temporary. So this really highlights how important it is to have a personalized approach, and be aware of your own mental and emotional state, especially if you're a beginner. Perhaps as we at Life and Divinity often say, the greatest journeys involve overcoming a few challenges.
That's true. Now, you have some personal experience with Vipassana. Can you tell us a bit about your own journey? What are some practical tips or insights that you gained that we haven't talked about yet?
Of course. I think one of the most profound shifts for me was really understanding how closely our thoughts and emotions are connected to physical sensations in the body. Before Vipassana, these things felt very separate to me. But through practice, I started to notice these very subtle bodily sensations. Maybe a slight tightening in my chest, a tingling in my hands. That would happen just before a strong emotion or a thought pattern emerged. And this gave me a moment, a window to just observe, without immediately reacting, to just witness how fleeting these experiences were. Before they took over, it's like noticing the first little ripple in a pond before the big wave comes crashing in. Also, learning to really be present with discomfort, both physical and emotional, without trying to push it away or distract myself. That has been so liberating in my day-to-day life. It's made me more resilient, more accepting. I remember one challenging meditation session had this really intense knee pain. At first, I just felt this frustration and this urge to move. But I used the technique. I brought my awareness to the sensation. I felt its intensity, its pulsing, and then, it shifted and subsided. All without me having to physically move. That experience really showed me how even intense discomfort is temporary.
That's a really valuable perspective. That image of the ripple before the wave is great. As a total newbie, a very curious beginner, I have a few questions. The 10 days of silence still feels like a lot. Is there any way to even start to approach that in our daily lives, even for a few minutes?
That's a great question, a very practical one. So while the silence during a retreat is designed to minimize distractions and allow for that introspection, you can definitely bring elements of mindful silence into your everyday life, even starting with 5 or 10 minutes a day where you don't speak. You're just present with your thoughts and your body. It can be a really powerful practice. It allows you to observe that urge to speak, to fill the silence, and to notice what comes up in that quiet space. You might be surprised by what you discover when you create those little pockets of silence in your day.
That sounds doable, a good place to start. And you mentioned observing sensations without judgment. How do you actually do that? What does that feel like?
Well, imagine watching a cloud move across the sky. You see its shape, its color, the way it moves, but you don't try to grab onto it or push it away. It's the same with sensations in your body, like maybe a feeling of tension in your shoulders,
or a sense of lightness in your chest. You just acknowledge it. You notice its qualities. Without labeling it as good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant, you observe it arising and passing away. Now, it's a skill. It takes practice. And you'll catch yourself judging sometimes. And when you do, the important thing is to just gently bring your awareness back to the observation without judging yourself for judging. It's all about developing that gentle, accepting awareness of what's happening in this moment.
That analogy of the cloud is very helpful. It makes it feel more like a gentle exploration, less like I'm giving myself strict orders.
It is. It's about cultivating that open, non-reactive awareness.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive into Vipassana meditation. It's clear that it's a path to inner peace and self-awareness, and as we've talked about, it's really for everyone.
Definitely. And all the resources are readily available for anyone who's curious.
We encourage you, our listener, to check it out. Look into resources like dhamma.org to find out about courses and their online platforms, whatever works best for you.
And as you go about your day, maybe take a moment to think about this. Observing your own experience, your thoughts, your feelings, your physical sensations, without labeling them, without judging them, see how that subtle shift in perspective can change your experience of life.
Some really powerful food for thought. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. And to our listeners, don't forget to subscribe to Life and Divinity for more deep dives into practices that can really make a difference in your life.